words altogether with people in London.
In Bologna, we are locked down more than ever. It's getting worse and worse.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So at the end of tonight's meeting, there'll be more time for everyone to briefly, if they wish, or maybe not so briefly, mention their projects and invite others to participate. And now I'd like to introduce Cassie Thornton here. And I'm trying to avoid long introductions that'll make people seem too intimidating to discuss with. So I'll just quote part of her book, The Hologram, where she sums herself up well. My name is Cassie and I'm an artist. That is partially why the hologram is identified as art rather than a health project or a social science project. An artist is what they sometimes call you, if you're lucky, when you insist on surviving without a capitalist job. In another non-capitalist time, and in a time that might yet come, I may have a more central role, problem solver, wizard, professional emoter. I believe that art should be democratized and the art world in all its preciousness should be abolished. But for now, I use my role as an artist to do things that surprise people. I call it art to move these projects outside of our world of bureaucracy, regulation, and skepticism. I do most of this art without money. I use art to make interventions because calling it art allows people to be surprised, awed, and open in ways they would not otherwise be. So the book's title is The Hologram, Feminist Peer-to-Peer Health for a Post-Pandemic Future. About an hour ago, I was asked to facilitate this meeting. So I had to prepare in a rush because the others were sick or something, they couldn't attend, and found this book unusually readable. So I think right now, I suspect it's a great first step for people who want to become organizers, to organize what Cassie will be talking about right now. And I'll definitely bring it up next week in a lab I help run for artist facilitators, because I think it really has a very good mindset and speaks to me on multiple levels. So Cassie, we'll speak for about 15 minutes and then we'll have 40 minutes for an open Q&A. So thank you, Cassie. Please go right ahead as you wish.
Thank you. TJ, you're so good at reading it. I want to make an audio thing with you.
Definitely. I'll definitely do that.
So yeah, it really feels different to hear you read it. It's so positive how you read it. I'm so honored to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me. And thank you for the invitation from Nika. Yeah, I just feel like you guys are like a secret circle that I didn't know I wanted to know. But now that I see who's here, Jonathan. So I guess I'll just jump right in and talk a little bit about this book, or not even about the book, about the project, because the hologram is kind of it was a project and it became a book as a way to distribute the project because the project wants to be viral. And so, yeah, and right now I'm calling from Canada, this little horrible city called Thunder Bay that's about 6 hours north of Minneapolis, right on the north shore of Lake Superior. Yeah, and I'll just share my screen. Oh, could I have the power to share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
The Zoom powers.
Now you do, I believe.
I got it. Okay. There we go. Oh, disappear. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, and I don't know. I guess actually, I would love a little bit of context about everybody else. I'm just gonna jump in thinking I know who you guys are a little bit, but the hologram is definitely a project that came out of a lot of years of anti-debt organizing. And as an artist for the last 10 or something years, I've done most of my work about debt as a material. And so, yeah, I think that's an important kind of piece of this puzzle. And then the other thing that I got really involved in now is doing a lot more work since I moved to Canada. I'm originally American. Since I moved to Canada, I've done a lot more work because I live in the racism and murder capital of Canada. Done a lot more like anti-racist work and support for Indigenous women and non-binary people, and a lot of direct action support work. So I think a lot of what I'm doing comes at the crossover between those two things, between the anti-debt work and kind of struggles for Indigenous struggles in Canada. So the hologram, though, exists in two ways. So it's first, it's a rumor. So it's like, basically, I think by reading the book and talking about it, and the way that the hologram functions, it can spread like a rumor or an idea for something that's possible using relationships and things we already have, without wasting resources, without changing a lot. We can have a really different experience and potentially a different economy that totally decenters money. And so in that way, I describe it as a kind of parafiction, like, let's talk about it as if it's something that's real until it becomes real. And then at the same time, it's actually a really specific social protocol for like peer-to-peer care that redistributes emotional labor. And the goal of either way is to create more people that are more healthy and more stable, who can survive the end of capitalism and figure out on the other side what else we need. And we like to say that it's practiced by people all over the world from their couches. The project comes directly from Social Solidarity Clinics of Thessaloniki, the Social Solidarity Clinic of Thessaloniki, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know about, the Social Solidarity Clinics that opened in Greece in the early 2010s that were in reaction to, or in creative response to the financial crisis, and that was at the same time as a refugee crisis. And I heard a rumor, love rumors, that there was a clinic that was in Thessaloniki that was where when you went to the doctor, you were seen by a therapist, a social worker, and a doctor at the same time. And as an American, without ever having access to health insurance and not very much healthcare at all, it blew my mind. And so I went to Greece, trying to find the people that organized this. The reason I was really acutely aware was because of looking at like anti-debt movements around the world and trying to understand the connections that debt makes between all different people in all different places. I was obviously really in tune with what was happening in Greece at the time. So I went there and I visited the Social Solidarity Clinic of Thessaloniki, which it took me a while to sort of locate and figure out where this project was happening. They were doing a bunch of really interesting projects that were like, okay, we already are offering free medical care to anybody that walks in, but like, what about non-hierarchical medical care? Like how can we confront the hierarchies that happen in medicine between doctor and patient, between genders, between migrant and Greek, between different types of professionals. And so they did a lot of really interesting experiments. But my favorite and the thing that inspired the hologram was called the integrative model. And first of all, when you went to this clinic, you were not called a patient, you were called an incomer. And this got me right away because the idea was that the only thing that was different between like a doctor and the person seeking care was that the person seeking care was on the outside of the building until they came in. So they're an incomer, not a patient. So they don't want to associate patient or the person receiving care with being broken or sick. Like their thing was that everybody needs care no matter who you are. So then you're seen by a therapist, a social worker, or a doctor at the same time. They ask you loads of questions to fill out this medical card, like, where do you work and what are your conditions? What are the conditions and where do you get your food and how do you feel? Are you lonely? How's your family? And they fill out this big card. And I think it's interesting that a lot of times the person who was working as a social worker was just a volunteer, so they weren't a professional. And so after about 90 minutes of like finding out this whole like huge spectrum of things about the person and their health, they would let the person go have coffee. The person would get a physical exam from the doctor, and then they'd come back and the doctors would say, hey, okay, so like what would it take for you to be healthy for the next year. And they would really try to get the incomer to say what they needed and how the doctors could support them, which is so different than how we usually experience all kinds of like professional care, from therapy to biomedicine. Like, so they were really trying to get the incomer to say like what it is that they need. And I'm very lucky to have been put in contact with this person that helped instigate this project named Froso Morelli. And she said, she's a psychologist, a kind of elder. So she's been a psychologist for many, many decades. And since she started this project, the integrative model, she said that it went from seeing people as pieces of paper to seeing them as a hologram. And I think what she's talking about is being able to see people from like all different dimensions. And so that's where we got the name, the hologram. And just been trying to figure out what that metaphor meant ever since. And so I discovered this project in 2016, the integrative model. I was living in San Francisco, like totally priced out, and me and all the people that I knew, basically, like we weren't going to be able to stay there very long. We were very, very precarious artists and activists. It was pretty hard to squat there. It was pretty impossible to afford a job or a stable living situation. So at that point, it was before Trump. So we weren't, in a weird way, acknowledging that we were in a crisis in the US around healthcare, though clearly we were. And if it was bad for me, then imagine being like not a white person with an education. So the question then was, how do you organize your own care before or during an emergency within a completely unstable set of conditions? And now that question is everyone's question. Maybe it always should have been. And so at the time, we were trying to figure out like what we could do in the US to try to implement something like the integrative model. But obviously, how are we going to do that when we don't have access to experts, we don't have access to space, we don't have access to money, we don't have stability in our lives, we're all a little sick. When we have been taught that we should only trust experts, and we don't really trust ourselves. And so I think really starting then is when we figured out that we really needed to figure out a way to work on this project as a peer-to-peer project. And so we just started to play with the idea of the person receiving the care being like an organizer. They're called the hologram, and they organize their own care. So they invite 3 people to ask them questions about mental, emotional health, questions about social health, questions about physical health. The idea being that that could become a regular practice. So like the hologram, and then the 3 people that meet with her and support her are called the triangle. They may meet, they decide how much they want to meet, like with what frequency and for how long, but they meet like regularly and over time. So over time, they get to know the hologram. And in a weird way, it takes the pressure off of trying to like solve somebody's problems or fix something. It's more about a kind of long-term relationship. And it's also very much a process of trying to distribute labor so that the people that are supporting somebody aren't supporting anybody alone, so that they can conserve energy and maybe even provide energy for themselves in a different way. The goal of the project is that nobody should have to make big decisions alone. And to understand that we're all facing lots of different like overlapping crises, and we can learn from each other's. And so obviously it's a process of learning how to ask questions and to not play the role of, not try to be an advisor or an expert, but to be curious about somebody else's well-being. If this group meets over time, the triangle can begin to notice patterns in the hologram in their speech and in their life, and acknowledge them, and maybe give the hologram an opportunity to decide their orientation to those patterns. And then if we imagine the hologram hits a wall, or is like somehow required to have like a surgery, like say, they're told that they need to have a very expensive surgery. And when you get news like that, it can be really traumatic. And so this would be an amazing opportunity to have the triangle jump in and do some co-research to figure out is that the right thing? And what are the other options? And let's find out the details together. And overall, the triangle becomes like a different kind of like living medical record. So like imagine that this group meets together every 3 months. Like mine meets more frequently now, but like if you meet with your triangle every 3 months, say even for like 1 year, imagine how much the triangle might know and learn about what's been going on in all the dimensions of the hologram's life. And then imagine that that lasts for 10 years or for the rest of their life. It's kind of amazing to have people that are, whose job is like one part of their job in life is to remember your story. So the incomer in the clinic is now called the hologram. We see the hologram as an expert about their own health. Nobody else knows what the hologram has been through or what makes them healthy or what makes them sick besides them. And I think maybe even more interesting is that the hologram is a teacher, but in a really specific way, because the hologram, by inviting people to support them, by explaining how to support them, and by telling them like when something does or doesn't work, basically like creating the context where they can be cared for in a way that is comfortable for them, they make that possible for the people doing it for them. Because in our society, organizing your own care, valuing your own care, asking for help, these are things that are not valued. In fact, they're really looked down upon, and we're really afraid of these things. So when you do it, you show other people it's possible. And I think that that is like some of the most important anti-capitalist work that we can do, is sort of actually practice being vulnerable and actively interdependent. The triangle that is asking the questions in support of the hologram, their job is not to solve problems. And that is really difficult for us. And I don't know if this is a capitalist problem, if it's a misogyny or a patriarchy problem, if it's a white problem, if it's, I don't know, colonial problem, but like the desire to plug the hole of the sinking ship is so big. But in this project, we really try to take the pressure off and say, the job of the triangle is to feel alongside the hologram, to try to understand what their experience is like and how they feel, but not to try to solve their problems for them. And I think that takes the pressure off, and it means that it can actually be a much like lighter and more like kind of playful experience, even when things get really serious. It's a really cool project that whether you're an artist or not, I think you end up really playing with how to ask questions. So not every question elicits a response, and it takes a while to understand how to like activate somebody so that they can actually respond to you. So the question asking process becomes really exciting and creative, and it takes time to figure out how to do it well. And again, the triangle is a living medical record. And so the project expands in a way that is really challenging, and that's on purpose, because the goal is that nobody who is giving care doesn't receive care. All the caretakers are supported. And so that works by having the hologram responsible to make sure that the people supporting them have support also. And the hope is that each person who is a triangle member becomes a hologram, and that the hologram, this bigger circle, say that that bigger circle is, I don't know, me, and that, no, let's make it Nika, and then I'm one of these, there's like a hard line and then another smaller circle, and I'm supporting Nika. Nika's job is not to give back to me what I offer as her triangle member, but for her to make sure that I am comfortable setting up my own hologram, and if I need any help, she can help me. And so in that way, the thing spreads, and it doesn't get trapped between people in a cycle. So it doesn't get trapped in like the kind of the regular thing that we're used to because of money, where like I give you something that I pretend is equivalent to what you give me. Doesn't go back and forth like that. And it also doesn't get stuck between a four where it just forever, the energy kind of spins around till it dies or whatever. It keeps moving through people and morphing as it does. And I think this is so interesting, and people push back against it a lot, but once you try it, it's really powerful. And I think the fear of being a burden, like the hologram does not want to feel like a burden to the people supporting them. That fear drives the project to become viral, which is so, so interesting. So the other job of the hologram is to be to be a triangle member for somebody else. So she's receiving care from somebody, that's great. Make sure that they're cared for. Next, become a triangle member for somebody else. And that transformation, like not everybody starts out as a hologram, some people start out as a triangle, but the transformation to believing that you can actually support somebody else can be really medicinal in itself. And then I think one of the last things I'm going to say is just that the project, it's quite slow, and it moves between people and it morphs as it moves. So if like Nika is a hologram and I'm in her hologram, I'm going to learn from my experience supporting her how I would want to do it for me. And then I'm going to probably shift some things, change the rituals, whatever. That's the next people that do it, or the people that support me, are going to do it differently. And so eventually the hologram can just disappear into sociality. It can just be a tool that people use and know about, and doesn't have to be centralized. Yeah. I'm going to skip to one other thing, which is just a little tiny bit about how it exists right now. So now the project, let's see, where do I start? The project has existed like on paper as a theory since 2016 or so, but then starting in the pandemic, kind of by coincidence, it became a course. Wasn't meant for the pandemic, but came at the right time. So we've taught 3 online courses for people that have basically wanted to practice the hologram. And like we talk about some of the proposals in the book about our relationship to time and trust and patterns and stuff. And we kind of imbue the practice with an anti-capitalist, anti-racist politics. And then as we practice it, as we started to hold these courses and practice it more and more, people began to actually practice it in their lives. And so then we realized we needed to kind of come up with some ways to keep things going. So we ended up forming something called the community of practice, which is, I think, probably the most exciting part of the project, because this is where it goes from being a kind of personal practice, or a practice that happens in different communities, to actually being more of like almost like a social movement and a laboratory. And I hope that this kind of grows and becomes a bigger part of the project. But so, you might be like, there's people that are practicing this in like Australia and Singapore and rural Oregon and Greece and wherever they are. And like, it can start to feel like, this is like, it's a therapeutic practice. It's interesting. It's helping me. It's not therapy, but it feels like it's a transformative practice, and that's great. But that's totally not the point. The point is actually building a much bigger network of people and having a chance for solidarity. And to kind of play with what it would be to have a different form of social movement that includes like introspection and cooperation, but also strategic organizing. And I don't know how that's going to happen. One day it'll happen and it'll make sense. But right now we have this community of practice, which is where all the people that have taken a course or that are practicing the hologram in their lives are invited to come to a monthly online discussion, where we have a kind of cool way of facilitating a pretty great conversation about the hologram practice that kind of circles into lots of different things. So we learn a lot about what's happening in the world with the practice. And then there's a really active Telegram group where everybody that we know that's practicing it is just sharing resources and talking about and organizing holograms. And it's very cool. And so I think hopefully this part of the project expands. And the last thing I want to say about it is that we have a pretty big group of people now, like organizing the project, facilitating different kinds of online stuff. And one of those things is like a 2-hour online ritual where you can have a facilitator help you and 3 of your friends go through a hologram conversation. And it's, at this point, because we've been doing it for a year, it's quite a timed, like clean, clear ritual. It's quite fun, usually pretty transformative. And it's like, now we have it down. So it's actually like 10 facilitators and a lot of capacity to do it for a lot of people. And so we are not offering them publicly until April 15th, just because we needed a break. But we've been trying to play with different forms for like how to make the form of the experience much more accessible to people, which has been exciting and a lot of learning. I think that might be, maybe I'm gonna leave it there. Let me make sure that there's nothing else. I mean, maybe you guys would like this, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's good to say these things. And then I'll be quiet for a second. Like, so I think, you know, this is definitely a project about creating like the possibility for more people to participate in anti-capitalist struggle. Like if they're healthy and stable, they can do that. It's definitely not a project about like helping governments replace social services that should exist and be available to all people. The project is totally taking for granted that we are a cooperative species and we just need spaces where we can practice it. Like the project is also about like these moments of hell that we're living through and difference and change. Like the best stuff can come out. Like we have a ton of powers to use in moments of change. Healing is hard, sucks. The person who needs help is the most important teacher and is powerful, and that we can collectively solve our problems without permission or authority. Yeah, and I'm so excited because right now, I don't know if you guys know Melanie Gilligan, but she made this amazing series of films that really inspired the hologram, like in my unconscious in 2009 or whenever she made them, called Popular Unrest, that totally predicted the moment that we're in. It's popularunrest.org. You can watch it for free. And she's working together with us right now to make a kind of sci-fi documentary about the hologram. And so that's kind of where I'm getting this thing that says unpopular arrest, because her films were called Popular Unrest. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm gonna turn this thing off.
All right, thank you, Cassie. So we're opening up our question and answer session, or if Cassie prefers, it can be a discussion session if you'd rather have a bit of a break. So would anyone like to begin, perhaps ask a question or like anything to discuss?
May I?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say it's amazing. It's just unbelievable. And thank you for coming. So I would just suggest after other people ask questions, maybe we can come back to the original proposal of Yash and start to discuss practicalities of how we can make a room in the Museum of Care that's will kind of take over the practice. And I'm just like was listening to Cassie and thinking, oh, who would be three people that I will ask to be, and how would I help them? So I was just immediately mapping this social landscape. So that's yeah. And my question is, yeah, I understand that it's very important not to replace services that government have to provide with self-help. And I know that about Russia, because in Russia, everybody is into fundraising to send people to treat cancer and so on abroad, instead of lobbying the government to buy, to build clinics and to treat cancer patients and so on in Russia. But still, like, do you see any technology that could be part of all the social design, not necessarily technology as a machine or medication, but some technology like
Social technology.
yeah, like yoga or whatever, like physical exercise, or how would you, something that would go through everything and recommend it to everybody, or like trying to spread through the social network.
I was wondering, I mean, there's this project in the UK called Talk for Health, and it's totally packaged like some neoliberal kind of like weird therapy thing, but it's actually quite radical. And that's been the thing that I've looked to when I've thought like, well, wow, like if maybe it is possible to like be funded or like spread through government systems in a way that's not really like compromising in a horrible way. So Talk for Health is like, it's called like therapy without therapists. And it's just like kind of people get trained. It's kind of a pyramid scheme, but at like a without money, people get trained to be able to like host group talk sessions, and then strangers are invited to gather like in cafes or libraries or whatever. It's all organized quite smart, in a smart way. And yeah, but it's like how can strangers kind of help each other? And the whole project is like, it's quite cool, but the way it looks, you'd never expect that it was actually kind of like an anarchist project. And so I think it would be interesting to see. I mean, I was thinking in my, well, not probably in my city, but I mean, we've talked to different people like doctors and people that work in healthcare about what it would mean to have the hologram instituted as like something that could happen like before, during, and after medical intervention. And that I could see being integrated into some sort of a medical system maybe. What I'm really interested in would be for decarceration. Like if there would be a way to help people transition from institutions to the outside in a way that was really like long lasting. So like a person that finds out they're going to be given early release or something, like they're like led through how to like select 3 people and then have 3 people that they start to talk to while they're still inside. They go through the transition with them and they still have them afterwards. And all the 3 people giving support also have support. That would be my biggest dream for if it could get integrated into some sort of like larger government system or something. But yeah, otherwise I just feel like we're working on trying to figure out how to make it like so accessible and easy so that especially after the pandemic, it's available, especially to like professional healthcare workers and people that are sort of coming back from whatever sort of deadening situation that they've been in. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it was very, very important, but yeah, I was just, you know, this website called Patient to Patient. It's yeah, it's like people started to, it's a social network when people voluntarily give up the information about what kind of drugs they're taking, how they affect them. It's a little Facebook. It's a bad, same things. It's a bad service because it belongs to the company and they're collecting data from different individuals. And now they have more data than any insurance company. You know, they're just very powerful because they can see for years like this particular drug against cancer or against depression, how it's affected, you know, this group, younger, older, and so on and so forth, on the millions of people. So I was thinking if this hologram could become some kind of open source platform for that type of data mining, that would not be, you know, kind of
Not be evil.
Raped by the companies.
Yeah, I mean, we're really working on trying to make like better ways of holding information for people, so that we can have a kind of interesting internet presence where people could actually like go somewhere, like have something organized for them, like, and practice it in a way that feels connected to other people on a website. But yeah, I mean, I think one possibility of the hologram is collecting research for the people that use it, like, and being able to cross-reference things that are happening like by location. Like if everybody in my city all was doing the hologram and we could somehow see patterns, it would be really interesting. And it would be really interesting. Like if everybody's got like the same problem with their teeth and it's obviously the water, it's like a really great platform to help people organize. But I don't know, I mean, I think there's just a lot of we have a long way to go before we can figure out how to deal with data and trust in that way so that could happen. But that would be so amazing.
Okay, it looks like Yash, Tanya, and Simona wanted to talk. So Yash.
Yeah, thanks a lot, TJ, and thanks, Cassie, for the talk. It's great to understand more about the concept. I think one point I was wondering about is just you mentioned the dynamics of like the broader communities of care, and I was wondering how do you strike the balance between like individual holograms, I suppose, if you can call them that, and like the broader groups. And I'm thinking in terms of like sharing information more broadly with the groups, what are the different purposes of each, and so on.
Yeah, it's a good question. So far, it's like we're just sort of maybe touching some boundaries for the first time or some limitations for the first time. Like right now, I would say I know that like maybe 60 or 70 people are like really active. And like you can already see people from the course have started to like integrate people from the course in their holograms mixed with people from their lives. And so then when we have like a gathering for community of practice, you can't just say anything already, like, because there's lots of people in the room that are all connected. But then I wonder, like, can you actually say anything anyway? And I think right now, like what we're going through is like people being hyper isolated and like more isolated, obviously, than they already were. And more like feeling more personal responsibility and individual pressure, like even than we already were when it was already at an all-time high before the pandemic. And so I think right now, like it's like a pretty big exercise for people just to go between like the small group and the big group. But we really need the practice. And I think in the end, what ends up happening is that like the big group creates like energy and accountability and excitement to keep doing the small group work. And then the small group work is so interesting that you want to share it with the big group. So yeah, and I think that there's like a bunch of like people building muscles, I think for the first time in terms of like, when we have the big group work happening, how do you communicate online in a big group, like create, like have a feeling of like progress and momentum and have everybody heard, but like to also share like vulnerable parts of yourself. And I think it's so interesting and so important because like we all need to do a lot more probably big group organizing more and more and more. And a lot of that's going to be online, and we need to exercise those muscles. So it's kind of like it feels like little steps, just like sort of trying to figure out how to like do these new things and expose ourselves to them without just like totally running our batteries out. But I think the coolest thing is if it can really be like really small, intimate work, and then like really big work where you feel connected to like some weird big organism that is angry and going to destroy all of this bullshit.
Tanya, were you wanting to say anything?
Yeah. Wow, Cassie, so cool. I feel a little bit emotional because I am such a product of our medical system in the United States, or not a product of the medical system, sort of, because I am an artist. I did not have health insurance. I had a car accident. I had like $200,000 worth of debt. And I think if I were in a different country, perhaps, or if the system was different, I would be a different person, because it's been 15 years and I'm just now starting to feel like I'm healing. And so much of what your model is what I had to kind of figure out on my own, but like self-advocate and like, because I got, went to a deep, dark, horrible place, I was able to get that kind of support through the system. So it was after the fact. It wasn't preventative. So I was able to get a social worker, a therapist, and a primary care physician, and but that was temporary. Anyway, what I'm just so like amazed that you were able to come up with this model and were able to incorporate all of your artistic sensibilities. Like I see choreography in this. I see the mirror neurons. I see so much of what I've learned through trauma too, is like the hierarchical sense of healing, of like going to an expert about like them telling me about my trauma did not help me. It wasn't until I started to talk to somebody else who went through a similar kind of trauma, or, anyway, I'm just like, my mind is blown, and I'm so excited about this, and I would love to help in any way possible. I also feel like because of all the work I've done, I could be a good teacher. I could be helpful. So yeah, in Museum of Care, would love to help with that, or wherever I can be a triangle, a point in a triangle, whatever. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah, isn't it? It's so crazy what happens everywhere, but the US medical system is so crazy.
Oh, I did have a question. Oh, sorry. No, because I watched one of your lectures about debt, and I was wondering if, and it makes sense, but like, did all of your work around debt lead you to help form this model, like in terms of the shame part? And
yeah, it's totally, I don't know if you guys know, I'm sure you guys know about like strike debt and stuff in the States. And so that was my training in a weird way, like having, those were I got thrown in as a facilitator for the first time there to like big debtors assemblies, where basically everybody got to say what kind of debt they had and kind of how it was controlling and containing their lives and livelihoods. And I think that was a really big learning curve for me, where I realized like just how amazing it is to understand to understand solidarity and feel the pain of others, and also to just feel that like you want something so bad for somebody else. It would help you so much to know that somebody else was going to be okay on so many levels. And that's so much, I think, embedded in this project. And like, I think for me, like, I was in the New York strike debt, but then I was really way more in the San Francisco one. And there were just times when like people took risks for each other or they didn't. And what's mine and what's yours, just when it comes to money, it's so hard. And there's something about shared responsibility that comes out of this project, like that just feels like really hardcore cooperation is possible in this project, no matter what you have. No matter where you're coming from. And yeah, I'm just thinking about this time, like when in strike debt, we decided that we wanted to like stop paying some of our debts and see what would happen. And this was kind of early on, but we were like, what happens? But like everybody was too afraid to do it. And so only 2 of us did it. And, both of us wrote it out and we're fine for it. But like, I think there's something about kind of mutual risk taking in this. Like, I'm like, the hologram is like, I'm going to risk doing what is so not okay in our society by being vulnerable and asking for what I need and actually admitting that I need help or whatever we're going to call it, support. And then that could potentially like help other people to take that risk. I think there's something about the kind of the viral risk taking that is so important and cool, and it creates this interdependence. It's such a neat feeling, really.
So I believe that Simona, Gabi, and then Amy wanted to say something.
Yes. Oh, I work in the Italian national health system, and I strive all the time to defend the system from privatization, and also to make healthcare more cooperative. The model of a healthcare I and those like me try to push for is something we call slow medicine. That is the relationships and the social and economic context of the patient are the most important, and the patient is the teacher, is the one who knows about himself and his needs. So this comes very close and very easy to me, what you say. Nevertheless, besides this most important part of a cure, there is also a technological and part of it, and there is a huge amount of knowledge on the medical side of the relationship. And so my question is, how do you, which kind of cure is that you perform in hologram, and which is the role, if any, of meds, technology, knowledge, hard medicine?
Yeah,
in a way.
It's such an important question, and I feel like I should always say this first, and I always forget. Yeah, many of my friends would not be alive without biomedicine, and it's really important to say that the hologram doesn't replace doctors and hospitals and medicine, but it goes underneath. Like, I think Tanya made a really good point. Like she got care when she needed it, but it was for a short term, and most of us can access like different forms of care for a moment here or there, depending on where we live and what we have access to, but like it's always spotty in a way. And so the hologram could be like a line that continues underneath always, in between the appointments. And in fact, I think the most useful thing has been for me trying to navigate a new medical system, because I moved to Canada and like had a bunch of health problems and needed to make some big decisions. I needed to actually like really self-advocate in a way that I never had before. And I needed people to be on the phone with me to tell me I wasn't crazy as I was pushing and asking and begging for what I needed. And I think that that's a really powerful part of the project, is like taking into account that like the medical system and doctors and pharmaceuticals, like we've, like humans have created amazing technology for healing, but it's not easy to access, it's buried. And so you really do need a team of people to help you get through it. And like what I've discovered in my hospital, which has its own problems related to like racism and poverty and stuff that are connected and different to other places, but is that like the hospital itself, it has technology, but I don't think it's a healing place. And I think that the healing happens after you leave, before you go and after you leave, and the hologram could help you with those things.
All right, Gabi, and then Amy, would you like to say anything?
Hi, Cassie, I was reading about your Give Me Cred project, and I was so fascinated, and I wanted to ask two things. One is, I only know these two projects that you have, and if there are others, like in the past or in the future, that you could share with us. Mm-hmm. And the other question is there, could you make examples or like case studies of good uses of hologram? Because still not very clear to me.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. I Give Me Cred was a project which was about giving creating alternative credit reports for people in specifically in San Francisco who were being displaced because of all the people that were coming to work for the tech industry. And so these people were coming, getting high paid jobs, some of them straight out of college, perfect credit scores, no criminal record, like whatever. They were just like walking in and just paying rent in cash and stuff. And so like tons of people fled San Francisco in the years that I was living there. And what we realized was that like a lot of people, the landlords were using credit scores as an excuse to be racist or basically just to deny housing to people they want to deny housing to. And then also related to the story of the people in strike debt who didn't want to like do the economic experiment and see what happens when you don't pay your debts. They were really worried about their credit score going down and not being able to get housing. So altogether, I was just trying to figure out ways to kind of play with that. And so I made an alternative credit report project where I posted in libraries and on Craigslist, like if you've got bad credit, let me make you an alternative auxiliary credit report. And so I would like interview people, they'd bring their resume and their traditional credit score. And I would make this alternative document that was like, this is why this person is amazing. These are the things they survived. These are their skills. And this is why you have to give them an apartment. And then I gave them references of different like kind of people that had jobs, like notable jobs in San Francisco I asked them to be references at the bottom. And it helped people, but I think it helped people not necessarily because of the piece of paper, but because somebody talked to them about what they had survived financially, and they left our conversation feeling like they deserved a house. So people got them after that. And then other projects, I mean, you know, I've been a full-time artist for a long time, just doing the weirdest shit. I'm trying to think of what any of it is. I mean, one project that I did that is incredibly flawed, but also hilarious, and you can watch videos of it, is feminist economics yoga. So I would like I trained as a yoga teacher, and I was like labeled myself a California yoga teacher, and I would work as a substitute teacher in yoga studios and then come in with some ideas about what real liberation would be like and teach that with our yoga. But a lot of times it was like having to do with race and corporate, you know, like the corporate takeover of yoga and cultural appropriation. And so I would kind of like I would hammer people a little bit while we were teaching yoga, and I got in a lot of different types of trouble for it. But it was pretty great at moments. And there's some very funny videos online. But yeah, my website is feministeconomicsdepartment.com for my older work, and I've done a lot of stuff. And in terms of hardcore, like actual examples of the hologram, I mean, I think the best use of it is in people's everyday life. So like, if you just sort of like invited 3 friends and you had like signed up for one of these things that I was talking about, which we call a minimum viable hologram, like a 2-hour online facilitated session, like me or somebody else would basically walk you through a system, or like not a system, we would walk you through 2 hours of like trying to get sort of on the same page together, have a pretty thorough conversation, where the 3 people ask you a bunch of questions. And then at the end of the conversation, like often people are like, do you want to keep doing this? This was kind of amazing. And it just starts from there. So it's not like necessarily always such an interesting conceptual thing. It's more just like what regular people are trying out and doing. And then like, I don't know, in a lot of cases, like it's pretty interesting. A lot of people, it spreads, right? So like a lot of people I know now who started doing it, like their triangles also are holograms. So you end up surrounded by people that kind of have some support, and it changes culture a little bit. It changes like what people talk about and stuff, because you don't have to, if you have some of your stuff talked through, you don't have to talk about it. You can talk about something else. I don't know. Yeah.
All right, Amy, would you like to speak?
So I loved the hologram and I really loved reading about it. And it especially spoke to me because my best friend of 41 years has primary progressive MS and is now she's just come out of the hospital. She's in a step down unit and she's going to be going on to assisted living. She's really lost a lot. And she was saying to me, she feels like she's 23. And I could say to her, I knew you when you were 23, you know? And she has created for herself a hologram. And I'm definitely one of her points. And I've been one of her points for 40 years. But she had to leave her home. She has 2 friends who live near her. She lives in California and I live in New Jersey. So who are going in and taking care of her dogs because that's their parts. They can do that. So I was just thinking how much this is on the continuum of the best practices we do for each other as friends. So, and I loved the feminist economic yoga, which made me laugh out loud.
Thank you so much for that story. It's so good to hear. I mean, because I feel like I'm like whipping people when I'm like, imagine 10 years in the future and you still have the same people around you and they're like, I cannot imagine, I don't want to commit, like I can't commit, no commitment, I'm post commitment, like so that's so awesome. And then the other thing I wanted to say is like, I think a lot of what I learned also is like I've got a couple of friends that have chronic illnesses or lifelong disabilities or, you know, different ways of doing things and different abilities. And they already had set stuff up like this a long time ago. I remember just like seeing one of my friends who's an artist, seeing his rider, like what he, when an art institution wants to work with him, he's like, I'm going to have to bring like my friend, my producer, and my nurse. And I'm going to have like, these are the things that are going to happen. And this is when, and like really having to think through these structures is a part of a lot of people's lives. But if you have always thought of yourself as healthy, then you didn't organize that. And so I guess maybe this is us trying to catch up a little bit.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yash, did you raise your hand? You're muted.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I just had one other question, just similar to, I think, what you mentioned, Cassie, about like the patient being like less of a patient and more of an incomer, you know, where it's like the person whose hologram is being made is the active organizer, like they're the expert. And I was curious because I think in like everyday life, it seems like when you do that kind of stuff, where like you're the one who's sort of actively like trying to get things done, advocating for yourself and so forth, it can end up being pretty tiring, you know. But it seems like within the hologram, it becomes like a pretty pleasurable or like fun thing to do, you know. So just wondering if you've seen those changes happen in people or how people have responded to that, you know.
Totally. Well, there's also like, it's such a good question because I think, so it's a lot of work to be the hologram, especially at first. So you invite people and then you're going to put them through something that you might not even understand that well. And then and it's like for you and about you. And so there's some like weird hoops to jump through. And I think like what I realized is that when I actually got sick, it's happened to a bunch of people I know actually, when we kind of like stopped feeling well, didn't have energy because we were sick or going through something hard, it was really hard to call people together. So we've had to, it's all about negotiation. So it's like, okay, well, like I had an emergency and I didn't have the guts or the energy to call my hologram at first. So we had to have a conversation about that and figure out, do some problem solving together. And what was so clear, and what's so clear from so many people that participate, is that the triangle loves their job. Like they actually, it's like, finally, I know what to do to help you. Like, finally, it's clear. And so like, all it took in my situation was to have a conversation like, what's the word? Like when we've got a Telegram chat, when I really need to see everybody, but I don't have the energy to organize it, what do I say? Octopus, obviously. And so it's just a matter though of like sort of having to go through some stuff like that and set some stuff up where it's like, when different things come up, how are we going to deal with them? And so the other thing that happens is that like you end up with like a ritual. So mine happens online. Not everybody does it online, but like we meet and we know what to do now. So we meet, we like say hello, we do this thing, this like little thing called the stuck dance from Social Presencing Theater. So there's a tiny somatic thing that's like very communicative and efficient for like making a good space. And then we start, and there's like we have a kind of routine, there's a routine for like what we talk about when. Everybody gives reflections, everybody gives feedback, we're done. And now nobody really needs to facilitate anymore, so it's not so much work for me. But I think in general, like the goal, like one of the goals with, especially when we started to teach the course, a lot of people were saying like that this felt so heavy, or like the idea of it was so heavy, but the practice of it is quite light. So like, I think it's quite fun. Most people, it's pretty energizing. And I think that is partially like setting that tone, like the project is a convivial project, but also like at the beginning, we often ask people to say like, what's the feeling you want to create by the end? Like, what's the feeling you want in 45 minutes or whatever? Predict the future for us, because we can pretty much do it. And so, yeah, I think you can create energy if you want to.
All right. Well, I know that Cassie's you're right now in Canada, so let's give you a chance to see the sun. So if there's anyone who'd like to make any announcements, I believe Mika has one, and anyone else who might like to announce a project that they might like to have participants, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, first I want to say, Cassie, thank you so much for coming, and I hope we can do a room of hologram in the Museum of Care. Yash, yeah? Yeah, and so maybe we come back later with the details of how to arrange that and so on and so forth, and start to figure out how to form these triangles inside Museum of Care or outside or whatever. Yeah, but my announcement is about something else. So next week is 150 years of Paris Commune, and in the same time it's a birthday of TJ, and it's on Thursday. So we were thinking to propose to move our assembly, our sacred assemblies, from Friday to Thursday, starting from the next week for a time being, because it's summertime and it's sun and people are going out in the weekends in any case. And some of my friends were complaining about Shabbat actually, who's like having the dinners on Friday. Yeah, but then I don't know if anybody would be attached to Friday instead of Thursday, or everybody agreed to move our assemblies. Let's make how we can vote. Okay, Claire. Okay, cool. So if people agree, they do like that, and if they disagree, they put stop. Okay, looks like agreement. So we see each other on Thursday, and if you have ideas about how to celebrate and how to have a party, like please discuss it on the mailing list. We will have John Jordan to make 15 minutes event about artists in the Paris Commune, because that's the big deal in the Paris Commune, being an artist. That's my announcement.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have an announcement? And again, I would like to thank Cassie as an organizer, direct action organizer. It's just rocked so much listening to Cassie and learning about Cassie. I'm so glad that people got sick so I could facilitate. So yes, does anyone else have an announcement, please? Jonathan Harris, would you like to go?
Oh yeah, I also wanted just to say hi to Cassie, and it's so lovely to see you and listen to all that. I did have a comment on the thing. I won't ramble on about it, but I just was really interested about the hierarchy and the use of, I've been thinking a bit about knowledge and power recently. And I love the fact that you're talking about like ritual and initiation I love the secret word of octopus. That's really cool. And the way that it sort of collapses that hierarchy, and the patient and the healer become the same sort of thing. So it's really cool. My thing is, which Cassie's come to before, and she was amazing. Did an amazing ritual. So it's a bit far off, so I won't ramble on. But Church of Bern is in June, and also I've been talking to Nika about possibly. I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything, but possibly about doing something. Yeah. So it's like, so the idea is, you know, Nika's got this amazing Fight Club idea.
It's a tip day too. It's our both, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So like, obviously, with burning money, people always are like, you know, why don't you give to charity? So that was kind of one idea. I did say to Nika I wouldn't do it because I'm not really don't really like confrontation. But when Cassie came last time, she had like a crew of balaclavaed feminists who kind of invaded the space, and it was really amazing. So I did think if I did it in a balaclava and people didn't know it was me, maybe I could defend. I could sort of make the fight for money burning against charity. I mean, they would know it was me, obviously, but I would feel okay about it. But thanks so much. Yeah, so June for all that. But you know,
yeah, I think we should definitely invite maybe Cassie if she would join for the Fighting Club project. And it's Claire here who proposed in the last discussion this absolutely cool idea of balaclava, transparent balaclava with printed out historical characters. So maybe she should, talk about that. And yeah, so I was actually already thinking how, like, if Cassie will be in the Fighting Club, if she would agree to, who she will be fighting against, who should be this historical character or whoever, who would be like, you know, be the challenge. Somebody professional medicine who wants us all to be like, you know, to hook up, like all our organs belong to this entity. So what would it be?
Margaret Thatcher.
Claire, how would you imagine the design, like costumes for Margaret Thatcher against Cassie?
Yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah,
anything's possible.
So would you like, yeah, probably you will be the great Margaret Thatcher actually.
The thing I was interested in as well, though, was we were talking about having a voice, like having microphones that could change someone's voice to like a deep fake in real time. Because if you were dressed up and wearing like a balaclava with the face on, you also sounded like them, it would be really fabulous. I thought you could you could argue in a way that that would make them spin in their grave if you wanted. My idea was to get a radical economist to sound like Rupert Murdoch, but still to argue his own ideas. Anyway,
Yeah,
we have some fun.
And it was Steve Batchelor idea to start everything with the fight of Hobbes against David, obviously. So that could like lead the whole other fights.
All right, any announcements left? Anyone would like to announce anything like a project? All right.
Something.
There you go. Excellent.
Yes, it's not actually a project. I have first a comment about what Cassie mentioned. So there was the idea of calling a patient an incomer. And I just wanted to throw out also that, especially in Western culture, we think of patients as consumers because the healthcare system is very much capitalist. So just wanted to, throw out that idea. But then separately, I wanted to thank Nika for mentioning something in our email group many weeks ago, which is the Ethics and Politics of Care reading group that started with the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory. And it just started just this last Tuesday, and it's really wonderful. It's in Belgrade, Serbia. So for those of us who might be in the US, it's very early in the morning, 5 a.m. But I just wanted to remind folks about that in case you didn't see that, because it just seems so very related to today's conversation and also other conversations that we've been having. This first round, we read a chapter from Jean Tronto's book, called Moral Boundaries. And she lays out kind of this process of care, starting from caring about, going to taking care of, and then to the caregiver, and then the care receiver, and really kind of emphasizing the role of the person who's receiving care. So anyways, I can put a link to that in the chat in case anybody wants to join. It's really wonderful.
Excellent. Thanks, Axel. So is there anyone else who would like to announce anything? Okay, it looks like our evening has come to an end. I guess it's time to bid everyone adieu. And thank you very much for attending. And again, thank you for everyone who participated, Cassie and everyone else who spoke. And so, yes, I wish everyone a good night.
Hang the rich.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. It was
Bye-bye.
amazing.